I believe that the first step to success is to accept failure as an inevitable part of the journey. When I started down the path with Alibaba, I failed countless times. It was frustrating at first, I admit. But it was in this process of making mistakes, trying again and failing again, that I discovered a powerful truth. Failure is never the end. It's always a fresh start. Every great achievement is born from a series of small mistakes that teach us what not to do, shaping our path to success. You might think that people who succeed quickly are simply talented or lucky, but the reality is different. Behind every success story, there is a string of failures that aren't talked about as much. In my case, when I launched Alibaba, there were many moments when things didn't work out. Failed negotiations, ideas that didn't work, and yet I never saw these failures as endings. They were opportunities in disguise, a chance to try again in a better way. One of the great lessons I learned was that failing early is essential. Failing early means you have time to recover, to adjust your course. When something goes wrong, instead of giving up, I try to understand what happened, absorb the lesson, and move on with a new approach. This ability to see failure as a teacher, not an executioner, is what kept me going through the difficult days. People tend to see failure as something to be avoided at all costs, but in fact, it is one of the most powerful forces for learning. When we fail, we learn more about ourselves, our business, and the people we're dealing with. These lessons are valuable because they prepare us for bigger challenges in the future. Every time something went wrong, it was a chance to improve, to evolve. Of course, accepting failure doesn't mean there's no pain involved. There always is. But the key is not to let that pain paralyze you. Accepting failure as part of the process allows you to deal with it in a lighter and more strategic way. With this mindset, you can move forward stronger and smarter. Now, here's an important truth. Failure isn't optional, it's inevitable. The only choice you have is how to react. My choice has always been simple. Learn, adjust, and move on. And that's the path for anyone who wants to achieve something great. Most of the time, failure is a bitter experience, the kind that makes you question everything. But I realized that failure is a tool that sculpts character. It's not just about dealing with rejection or recovering from a stumble. It's about the ability to look at failure as a lens, which reveals aspects of our journey that we can't see when we're only focused on success. Learning from failure is not a skill you develop overnight. It's a process, almost like a discipline. When I think about the failures that have marked my career, I no longer see the closed doors as moments of defeat. I see them as windows for deep reflection. Every time something has gone wrong, I've asked myself, what have I failed to realize? It is in this question that the true richness of failure lies. It forces you to see beyond the surface, to look for the blind spots that could be preventing you from growing. Sometimes the mistake lies in something you neglected, a skill you didn't develop enough, or even a belief you thought was unshakable. An important point that many don't mention is that failure can be a moment of silence, an invitation for introspection. When we fail, we are forced to stop, to breathe, and in that interval, we can reconnect with why we started in the first place. I remember moments in the early days of Alibaba when things just didn't work out the way we imagined. We had to stop and look at the scenario from another angle. In those pauses, when the noise of the market fell silent, I was reminded of the greater purpose. And that's what failure offers us, an opportunity to realign our efforts with our goals. Failure also requires you to learn to abandon perfectionism. What prevents us from learning from failures is often our need to always be right. When you let go of this pressure to be perfect, that's when you really start to see the value in your failures. I was never perfect, and I'm still not. Accepting this has freed me up to experiment more, fail faster, and with that, adjust faster. People are afraid of failure because they associate it with something definitive, but failure is actually an open door to try something different. Something I've learned over time is that failing with purpose is much more valuable than never failing because you're afraid to take a risk. Intentional failure, the kind that comes from a courageous attempt to create something new or challenge the status quo, is the kind of failure that moves you forward. Calculated error is what generates innovation. Many of the great ideas that drove Alibaba were born out of moments where we dared to fail, where we decided to explore the unknown, even though we knew we could get hurt along the way. But by embracing this risk, we allow ourselves to discover new ways of achieving our goals. When you see failure as an ally, it stops being a burden. It becomes a tool for your growth journey. This change in perspective has been one of the most powerful lessons I've learned along the way. Every failure is a step towards greater success, as long as you are willing to learn and adjust course. What you do after failure is what defines how far you can go. This is what differentiates those who achieve something extraordinary from those who are paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes. Rejection is something we all face, and I'm no exception. Since I was young, I've been rejected in several situations. I tried to get into several universities and was turned down in all of them. I remember when I tried for a job at KFC, out of 24 applicants, 23 were accepted. I was the only one to be rejected. It may sound like a story of defeat, but the truth is that those rejections shaped the person I am today. Persisting in the face of adversity is what kept me going. Each rejection I faced was like a kind of fuel. Instead of getting down on myself, I decided to use these experiences as a way to improve. With each no I received, I became more determined to turn that no into an opportunity. It wasn't easy, of course. There were days when I questioned whether it was worth continuing, whether I was really on the right path. But looking back, I realized that persistence was what made the difference. Persistence isn't just about carrying on when things go wrong. It's also about learning to deal with rejection in a healthy way. We can't control whether or not we'll be rejected, but we can control how we react to it. For me, each rejection was an opportunity to learn, to better prepare myself for the next attempt. And it was this mentality that helped me build Alibaba. In the business world, rejection is constant. Many times investors and partners rejected my ideas. They said that Alibaba had no future, that e-commerce in China wouldn't work, but something inside me told me that I was right, that the future was on the internet, and I persisted. If I had given up at the first rejection, Alibaba wouldn't exist today. I always say that success is not a straight line. Persistence gives us the strength to overcome the ups and downs. It's what turns obstacles into steps. Every no I heard was another step towards the yes that would change my life. And I believe that this is a lesson that everyone can apply to their own journeys. Persistence is not a choice, it is a necessity. No matter how many times you fail, how many times you are rejected, the important thing is to keep going. Because in the end, it's those who persist who succeed. And there are no shortcuts to this. It's a path that needs to be walked one step at a time. Mistakes are inevitable, but the real question is, what do we do after making them? I've always believed that every mistake I've made has been a learning opportunity. From a young age, I understood that failure was not the end of the road, but the beginning of a new learning journey. Life is like that. You either learn from your mistakes or you're doomed to repeat them. Failure itself is not the problem, but how we react to it. During Alibaba's early years, we made countless mistakes, from marketing strategies that didn't work out to negotiations that fell through. I could have given up at each of these mistakes, but instead I decided to learn from them. For me, each failure revealed something we needed to improve, a lesson embedded in each challenge. Each time we made a mistake, we became smarter, more resilient, and better prepared for the next challenge. I believe that the greatest value of a mistake lies in how it makes us reflect. When we make a mistake, we have two choices: ignore it or analyze it. I always preferred the second option. It was a constant practice to look at what went wrong and try to understand where we could have done things differently. This process of continuous self-evaluation was essential to Alibaba's growth and is something I believe is vital for any entrepreneur or person seeking personal growth. One of the biggest mistakes I made was not initially believing in the power of online payment for Alibaba. In the beginning, we were only focused on connecting sellers and buyers without thinking about the issue of payments. This caused a lot of problems, and we missed a lot of opportunities. But this mistake taught us something essential. Trust and ease of transactions were crucial to the success of e-commerce. And it was from this learning that Alipay was born, transforming the way people did business online. Learning shouldn't just be individual, it should be shared. At Alibaba, we always encourage our staff to talk about their mistakes. We created a culture where making mistakes was not seen as something negative, but as an opportunity for growth. This allowed us to evolve quickly, because when one of us learned something, we all learned together. This collective learning environment was one of our company's greatest assets. In the end, the real lesson is that mistakes are a necessary part of success. They make us grow, force us to adjust our routes, and prepare us for the future. The important thing is not the mistake itself, but how we react to it. If we learn from our mistakes, they become our greatest teachers, and that puts us one step ahead of those who are afraid to fail. Throughout my life, I've faced many closed doors, but every no I've received has been the fuel to keep trying. One of the biggest challenges is to see the negatives as opportunities in disguise. When I started Alibaba, nobody believed that China could be an e-commerce powerhouse. People said that the Chinese market wasn't ready, that the internet wasn't reliable, and that consumers preferred direct contact. But instead of seeing these criticisms as insurmountable barriers, I saw them as a chance to prove the opposite. Turning a negative into a positive requires a change of mentality. Instead of focusing on why something can't work, I always ask myself, how can I make it work? When everyone doubted Alibaba's future, it didn't make me give up. On the contrary, it gave me even more determination. I realized that the criticism was revealing areas we needed to improve and challenges we needed to overcome. Each obstacle became a new strategy. A clear example of this was when we tried to launch the online payment system at the beginning. We received a lot of resistance from the banks, who didn't believe in the model. That could have been the end of the idea, but instead of giving up, we decided to create Alipay, our own system that would solve the problem of trust in online transactions. What was a negative from the banks became one of Alibaba's greatest innovations, guaranteeing our leadership in the market. The key to turning a negative into a positive is to stay focused on the end goal. No matter how many times I was told no, I knew that Alibaba had the potential to change commerce in China. The key was not to let the criticism get me down, but to use it to improve the business. When people said that e-commerce had no future, it only reinforced my belief that we were on the right track. Resistance from others is often a sign that we are doing something innovative. In business and in life, the ability to see beyond the negative and find the positive is crucial. This doesn't mean ignoring criticism or difficulties, but using them as starting points for new solutions. Every time I encountered a negative situation, I asked myself, what can I learn from this? This simple question led me to some of Alibaba's greatest innovations. Ultimately, I learned that negatives are not the end, but the beginning of something new. They force us to think outside the box, innovate, and find ways to overcome challenges. If you can turn every criticism into an opportunity, you'll find that the path to success becomes much clearer. After all, the biggest changes come from where we least expect them. Resilience isn't something you're just born knowing. It's something you build up over time. At the beginning of my journey with Alibaba, there were countless moments when it felt like everything was falling apart. Each challenge seemed to be bigger than the last. We had funding problems, technological challenges, and a lack of trust from the market. But instead of letting these difficulties defeat me, I used each one as an opportunity to strengthen myself and prepare for the next obstacle. Resilience is essentially the ability to get up every time life knocks you down. I was once told that a person's true strength is not measured by the number of times they fall, but by the number of times they get up. And that applied to my life and business. There were many times when Alibaba almost failed, but instead of giving up, I used those moments to reflect and adjust our path. Resilience allowed me to maintain a long-term vision, even when the short term seemed uncertain. What makes resilience so powerful is that it creates a kind of inner confidence. When you realize that you can overcome anything, you start to face challenges with a new mindset. When Alibaba failed to attract investors in the beginning, instead of accepting failure, we kept fighting. We knew that with time and effort, we could turn the situation around. And that's exactly what we did. Our resilience allowed us to face each new rejection with more determination than before. Something I always tell my collaborators is that resilience is not just a question of physical or mental strength, but of passion and purpose. When you have a clear purpose, it's much easier to maintain resilience because you know what you're fighting for. In the case of Alibaba, our purpose was to democratize commerce for small businesses. This gave us the strength to face the difficulties and keep moving forward, even when it seemed impossible. In times of crisis, we often look at failure as the end of the line, but in reality, it's just an opportunity to reassess, adjust, and keep going. Resilience is what turns the biggest challenges into valuable lessons. If you can develop this skill, you'll realize that no obstacle is big enough to stop you. The question is not whether you will face challenges, but how you will deal with them when they arise. Resilience in the end is what allows us not just to survive, but to thrive. It's what turns difficulties into stepping stones to success. Whenever you feel discouraged, remember that every great success story began with moments of adversity. And what separates those who give up from those who triumph is the ability to get up and carry on. One of the biggest factors that kept me going during the toughest times was believing deeply in my purpose. When I started Alibaba, it wasn't just about creating a company. It was about creating something that could transform the way small businesses do business, not just in China, but around the world. This clear purpose is what gave me the strength to face the challenges and persist even when everyone said it was impossible. Believing in a higher purpose is what sets you apart in times of crisis. When you have a mission that goes beyond you, failures become insignificant compared to the impact you can generate. In the early years of Alibaba, we had many moments of doubt. We weren't the best funded company, and our business model was viewed with skepticism. But even so, I believed that we were on the right track because our purpose was more important than any obstacle we faced. I remember a conversation I had with one of my first collaborators. He asked me, "Jack, how do you manage to remain so confident when everything seems so uncertain?" My answer was simple: because I believe in what we're doing. This belief in purpose allowed us to keep going even when the future looked dim. We knew we were creating something that would change the lives of millions of small businesses, and that vision was what kept us focused. Believing in purpose also helps keep the team aligned. At Alibaba, right from the start, we shared our vision with every employee. It wasn't just about making money. It was about empowering small businesses. This created a culture where everyone was committed to the same goal. And in difficult times, this unity was crucial. Everyone knew what we were fighting for and what we wanted to achieve. When you believe in your purpose, it's much easier to attract people who share that same vision. Purpose is the fuel that drives you forward at times when nothing else seems to make sense. It's what gives you clarity in times of confusion and keeps you steady when everything around you is falling apart. For me, believing deeply in Alibaba's purpose was what allowed me to keep my head up, even when the results weren't showing. I knew we were building something bigger than ourselves, and that gave me the strength to keep going. At the end of the day, success doesn't just come from hard work or the right strategy, but from believing in what you're doing. When you believe in your purpose, the impossible becomes just a temporary obstacle. And it's this faith in purpose that allows you to turn failures into learning and keep moving forward towards your goal. People often see failure as the end of the line, but for me, failure has always been an opportunity in disguise. Throughout my journey, I learned that every time something went wrong, there was a new chance to look at the situation in a different way and discover a new approach. Failure taught me more than any success ever could. A clear example of this was when we tried to expand Alibaba into new international markets in the very first years. It wasn't easy. In fact, there were many setbacks. In some markets, we simply couldn't establish ourselves, and that was a huge blow. However, rather than giving up, we used these experiences to adjust our strategy. We realized that we needed to better understand local cultures before trying to insert ourselves. What initially seemed like a defeat became a valuable lesson that shaped the company's future. Turning failure into an opportunity requires a change of mentality. When things don't go according to plan, it's easy to fall into despair. But if you stop and take a closer look, you'll see that each failure brings with it a unique opportunity for growth. It's like looking at a picture from different angles until you find the right perspective. This is what has kept me resilient over the years. On my journey, I've learned that often the best opportunities arise just when everything seems to be falling apart. I firmly believe that when we face failure, we are actually being directed towards something bigger and better. That's how I built Alibaba. With every obstacle, every no we received, we looked for a way to turn it into a stepping stone to climb even higher. When we face difficulties, our first reaction is to want to escape them. But the real secret to success lies in facing failure head-on and asking, what can I learn from this? For me, these lessons were more valuable than any book or piece of advice. Each mistake gave me insights that I would never have discovered if it had worked first time. Failure isn't the end. It's a new beginning in disguise. That's why, over the years, I've come to see every setback as a door to new possibilities. It's a mindset shift that takes practice. But once you learn to see failure as an opportunity in disguise, the possibilities are endless. There are no limits to what you can achieve when you stop fearing failure and start embracing it as part of the journey to success. When it comes to rejections, I've had my share. Perhaps one of the best-known stories is the time I was rejected by Harvard. Believe it or not, I applied 10 times. Yes, 10 times. And each time I got a resounding no. But instead of letting that get me down, I used those experiences as fuel to keep going. Harvard may not have had a place for me, but I knew I had something to offer the world. Another example is when KFC came to my town. They were hiring, and 24 people applied for the job. 23 were accepted, and I was the only one to be rejected. Was that a blow? Absolutely. But those moments of rejection taught me something very important. Rejection doesn't define our value. What does is how we react to it. Every no I received, whether from Harvard or KFC, made me look deeper inside myself and find the strength to carry on. Rejection is not an easy thing to accept. In fact, it can be crushing. When you do your best and still get a no, it's natural to question your abilities and even your self-esteem. But the key is not to let this become an insurmountable obstacle. I've learned over time that rejection is an inevitable part of the journey to success. And more than that, it's a powerful tool to push us to try again, but more wisely. When I founded Alibaba, rejection remained a constant. Many investors didn't believe in the idea of e-commerce, especially in China. They said it was a Western concept and would never work in our country. And every time we heard this, we used it as an opportunity to refine our vision and prove them wrong. Persistence in the face of rejection is what allowed us to build something great. The truth is that everyone faces rejection. What makes us different is how we deal with it. I could have given up after being rejected by Harvard so many times, or after the episode with KFC, but instead, I decided to keep going. I knew there was something bigger waiting for me, something that could only be achieved if I persisted. And it's this mindset that I want to share. Rejection is not the end. It's just part of the journey. So if you find yourself in a situation where the world seems to be telling you no, remember, every rejection is an opportunity in disguise. Use these experiences to grow, learn, and improve. Believe in yourself even when others don't, and keep going. Success is reserved for those who persist, no matter how many times they face the word no. One of the biggest challenges I faced along my journey came not from other people, but from within myself. Internal doubts can be the most difficult obstacles to overcome because they whisper in our minds at the most vulnerable moments. We all go through this. At the start of my career, especially after numerous rejections, there were times when I questioned whether I was on the right path. Was I really capable of building something great? The truth is that at some point we are all haunted by these inner voices. They can paralyze us or motivate us to prove them wrong. For me, it was an ongoing battle, but I knew that if I didn't face these doubts, they would prevent me from reaching my potential. So I began to develop a practice. Every time a doubt arose, I challenged it with action. Doing something, however small, helped me silence these voices. While building Alibaba, there were many moments of uncertainty. The Chinese economy was still adjusting to the digital world, and the idea of e-commerce seemed distant to most people. Many people told me I was crazy, that Alibaba would never work. And sometimes this doubt echoed in my mind. But instead of letting it get to me, I focused on our purpose. Doubt only has power if you allow it to paralyze your actions. If there's one thing I've learned over time, it's that doubt can be an ally if you use it in the right way. Instead of ignoring it, face it. Ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? What can I do to turn this doubt into something positive? It is often in the process of facing our fears and insecurities that we find the strength to move forward. It is in this confrontation that growth takes place. I often compare these internal doubts to storms. When we're in the middle of a storm, it's hard to see the way ahead. But we know that eventually the storm will pass and the sky will be clear again. The important thing is to keep moving, even if we can't see the destination clearly. It's persistence during these dark moments that makes all the difference. So when doubts arise, and believe me, they will, remember that you have the power to overcome them. Use them as a spur to action. By doing so, you'll discover that the strength you need to achieve your goals has always been inside you, waiting to be activated. Receiving feedback isn't always easy, especially when it's critical and makes you question what you're doing. However, throughout my journey, I've learned that the harshest feedback can be the most powerful tools for growth. When I started Alibaba, many people told me that the business model wouldn't work, that e-commerce had no future in China. To be honest, listening to this criticism was difficult. But over time, I realized that these voices were helping me to see blind spots that I myself couldn't see. Listening to criticism doesn't mean accepting it blindly, but rather using it as an opportunity to reflect and improve. At first, my first reaction was defensive. They don't understand what I'm trying to do, I thought. But after a few years, I began to realize that instead of ignoring, I should listen carefully. Instead of simply rebutting or justifying, I began to ask myself, what can I learn from this? This change in perspective transformed the way I dealt with feedback. A clear example of this was when we started expanding Alibaba beyond China. We received a lot of feedback that we wouldn't be able to compete with global giants. But instead of discouraging us, we used this criticism as a way of adjusting our strategies. We decided to focus on small and medium-sized businesses, a market that was being neglected by the tech giants. This change led us to create a unique space in global e-commerce. Receiving negative feedback also taught me about emotional resilience and emotional intelligence. Often, the problem isn't what people say, but how we deal with it. If we are emotionally shaken by every criticism we receive, we will never be able to move forward. It's important to develop an emotional shell that allows us to receive this feedback without it bringing us down. One of the biggest challenges for any leader is to balance confidence with humility. You need to be confident enough to believe in your vision, but humble enough to recognize when you're wrong. Feedback, especially harsh feedback, is the compass that helps us adjust course, ensuring that we are heading in the right direction. When we start looking at feedback in this way, it stops being a threat and becomes a valuable source of information. Finally, I've learned that those who criticize us the most are often offering us a chance to improve. We need to look beyond the momentary pain and focus on long-term growth. If you want to build something great, you need to be willing to listen to what others have to say, especially when it's hard to hear. Only then, with real hard feedback, will you be able to adjust your trajectory and achieve success. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned along my journey is that failure is not only inevitable, but necessary. At the beginning of my career, I had a paralyzing fear of making mistakes. But time has shown me that failing quickly, and more importantly, adjusting quickly, is the secret to long-term success. At Alibaba, we made a lot of mistakes, but our speed in correcting those mistakes is what kept us ahead. When we were launching Alibaba, there were many decisions we made that didn't work out right away. But instead of trying to avoid failure at all costs, we embraced this idea of failing fast. If something wasn't working, we didn't dwell on the mistake. We stopped, adjusted our strategy, and moved on. This mentality allowed us to learn in real time, adapting to the changes and needs of the market. Failing fast doesn't mean being reckless. It means experimenting, testing ideas, and when they don't work, not wasting time. One of the clearest stories about this was our initial attempt to monetize Alibaba by charging users a membership fee. The idea looked good on paper, but the reaction was very negative. We quickly realized our mistake and adjusted our strategy, offering the service for free until we had a solid user base. This approach not only saved Alibaba from potential disaster, but showed us the value of flexibility. The business world, especially the technology world, changes at breakneck speed. If you're not willing to fail fast and adjust course, you'll end up being left behind. Many companies fail because they can't make these adjustments in time. They get stuck in their initial ideas, and by the time they realize that the market has changed, it's too late. It's also important to point out that failing quickly isn't enough if you don't learn from those mistakes. Every failure is a learning opportunity, and the quicker you absorb the lesson, the quicker you can apply it. At Alibaba, we have implemented a culture where mistakes are not punished, but analyzed and discussed openly. This has allowed us to create an environment in which innovation thrives because people aren't afraid to make mistakes. So the real key here is this: don't be afraid to make mistakes, but have the courage to correct course quickly. If you master this skill, you will see that failures are not obstacles, but stepping stones to the next level. And remember, the faster you fail, the faster you can adjust and consequently achieve success. When I look back, I see that failure was never the end of my story. In fact, every mistake I made, every challenge I faced, contributed to building something much bigger than I could have imagined, a legacy. In the beginning, when Alibaba was just starting out, it was difficult to see beyond the daily difficulties. But over time, I realized that failures were not a sign of defeat. They were an integral part of our path to success. Turning failure into a legacy means accepting that mistakes are part of building something lasting. When I started out, my vision wasn't just to create an e-commerce company. I wanted to impact lives, create opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses, and change the way commerce was done in China. But in order to achieve this goal, we had to fail several times. Each obstacle forced us to innovate, to think differently, and most importantly, not to give up. A clear example was when we launched the Alipay payment platform. At the time, many doubted that such a system could work in China. Failure seemed imminent, with criticism coming from all directions, including banks and the government itself. But we believed that this was the way to facilitate e-commerce. Through a lot of trial and error, we managed to turn Alipay into one of the largest payment platforms in the world. Today, it is not only a successful product, but an example of how perseverance and the ability to learn from mistakes can create a lasting legacy. Legacy is not only built on success, but on how we deal with failure. At Alibaba, we've always promoted the idea that if we're not making mistakes, we're not innovating enough. It is this mentality that has allowed us to grow continuously, even in the face of enormous challenges. More than that, we have created a culture where failures are seen as opportunities to improve, and this, I believe, is a fundamental part of the legacy we are building. Another important lesson about legacy is that it's not just about us. It's about the impact we leave on others. Every time we overcome failure, we show millions of small entrepreneurs that it's possible for them too. Alibaba's legacy is not just our success, but the doors we've opened for others, the jobs we've created, and the lives we've touched. This is something that transcends financial success. It's about social impact and transforming lives. Finally, turning failures into a legacy requires a clear vision of the future. I always believed that Alibaba could be more than just a company, and that gave us the strength to keep going, even when things weren't going well. Failure is part of this journey, but with each lesson learned, we get closer to realizing our purpose. Today, I see that Alibaba's true legacy is not just our success story, but the example that by learning from our failures, we can build something bigger than ourselves.
When you think of success, it's easy to imagine a smooth path filled with triumphs and accolades. But what if I told you that the secret to real success often comes from failure, rejection, and relentless persistence? Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, faced countless obstacles on his way to becoming one of the most influential entrepreneurs in the world. From being rejected by Harvard 10 times to being turned down for jobs at fast food chains, Jack Ma's story is not one of instant success, but of learning from each failure and using it to fuel his mission. This video dives deep into how Jack Ma embraced failure, built unshakable resilience, and turned rejection into a billion-dollar legacy. If you've ever doubted yourself or feared failure, stay tuned. Because Jack Ma's journey will show you that the path to success is paved with mistakes, and that persistence and purpose can carry you through any challenge. Each lesson is not only relevant to entrepreneurs, but can help anyone aiming to improve their mindset, resilience, and personal growth. Prepare to be inspired as we explore how failure can be your greatest ally on the journey to success. Jack Ma is a prime example of how failure can be a powerful teacher on the road to success. From a young age, he faced numerous rejections and obstacles that could have made anyone give up. However, he understood that failure wasn't the end, but rather the beginning of something new. After failing school exams and being rejected by several universities, Jack Ma chose to see these experiences as opportunities for growth. He believed that failure comes with valuable lessons and that embracing it is the first step toward personal and professional development. Embracing failure also means recognizing that it's an essential part of achieving great things. Jack Ma never saw himself as a victim of his circumstances, but rather as someone who could learn and evolve from every mistake. Throughout his journey, he showed that each time he failed, he used that experience to refine his approach and try again, but with more wisdom. This growth mindset helped him turn adversity into fuel for his determination. For Jack Ma, failure was never a roadblock, but a stepping stone to greater success. Jack Ma's experience teaches us that accepting failure as part of success builds resilience and courage. He believes that the faster one fails, the quicker they can learn and adjust. This concept not only applies to entrepreneurship, but also to everyday life, where each mistake is an opportunity for personal growth, whether in developing new habits, increasing productivity, or enhancing emotional intelligence. Jack Ma faced countless rejections throughout his life, from failed attempts to get into colleges to being turned down in dozens of job interviews. Rejection was a constant, yet he never allowed it to shatter his self-confidence. On the contrary, with each closed door, Jack Ma became more determined to press on. He understood that persistence was the only way to move forward, even when the odds were against him. This relentless attitude was what kept him going, even when everything seemed bleak. Persistence, for Jack Ma, was not just about surviving setbacks, but thriving because of them. Each rejection was a lesson in patience and endurance, teaching him to find new solutions and refine his strategies. Whether it was failing to secure a job at KFC or being rejected from Harvard multiple times, Jack Ma's ability to keep going despite constant rejection became his greatest asset. His persistence in the face of adversity laid the foundation for what would become one of the most successful companies in the world, Alibaba. What Jack Ma's journey teaches us is that persistence isn't just a nice-to-have trait, but a necessity for achieving success. It's a reminder that in any area of personal growth, whether in building self-discipline, improving time management, or developing mental resilience, the road will be filled with obstacles. The key is to keep moving forward no matter how many times you are knocked down, because persistence is often the deciding factor between success and failure. For Jack Ma, every failure was a lesson in disguise. He firmly believed that mistakes weren't setbacks, but stepping stones. Rather than seeing errors as something to avoid, he viewed them as opportunities to learn and grow. This philosophy allowed him to build a mindset where every misstep provided valuable insights for future decisions. In the world of entrepreneurship and life in general, learning from mistakes is crucial. Jack Ma's ability to adapt after each failure gave him a unique edge in business and personal growth. Mistakes, when approached with the right mindset, offer some of the most important lessons. Jack Ma emphasizes that the key is to analyze failures, extract the lessons, and use them to adjust your course. This ability to reflect on past experiences rather than dwell on them is what allowed him to build resilience and innovation within Alibaba. Every error helped him fine-tune the company's operations and decision-making processes, turning initial failures into long-term successes. In personal growth and self-improvement, the ability to learn from mistakes is essential. Whether in productivity, time management, or emotional intelligence, errors offer valuable feedback on what needs improvement. Jack Ma's experience teaches us that failure is not the end of the road. It's simply part of the process. It's about taking those lessons and using them to become better versions of ourselves. Resilience is one of the defining traits that set Jack Ma apart from others. His journey to success was riddled with setbacks, yet his resilience allowed him to continue pushing forward. Building resilience, according to Jack Ma, starts with accepting that failure is inevitable, but that giving up is a choice. He believes that it's not the absence of failure that defines success, but the ability to rise each time you fall. This mindset is critical, not only in business, but in every aspect of life. Jack Ma's resilience was built over time, shaped by his many rejections and failures. He learned that the key to never giving up was to develop a thick skin and stay focused on the bigger picture. Resilience allowed him to navigate through challenges with determination, learning to pick himself up after every fall. His journey exemplifies how mental toughness and emotional intelligence are crucial components of long-term success. Resilience is the foundation for achieving any goal, whether it's in personal development or professional growth. Jack Ma's story teaches us that setbacks are temporary, and that resilience gives us the strength to persevere. It's about staying committed to the vision, even when faced with overwhelming obstacles. In every area of life, resilience is the driving force that helps us overcome adversity and reach new heights. For Jack Ma, one of the most important lessons in his journey was the power of believing in a larger purpose. From the very beginning, he had a clear vision for Alibaba, which was to help small businesses thrive in a global economy. This belief in his mission kept him going during times of uncertainty and difficulty. Jack Ma understood that having a strong sense of purpose is what fuels perseverance, even when success seems distant. Believing in his purpose gave Jack Ma the strength to endure hardships and setbacks that might have deterred others. He knew that the path to success was not straight, but his deep conviction in the value of Alibaba's mission kept him moving forward. His belief was contagious. It inspired his team to stay committed, even during the company's toughest periods. It was this unwavering belief in his purpose that helped him transform Alibaba from a small startup into a global giant. Having a clear purpose is essential not just in business, but in personal growth as well. Whether it's self-discipline, goal setting, or personal development, knowing your why gives you the motivation to overcome challenges. Jack Ma's journey shows that believing in a higher purpose fuels long-term success and keeps you grounded through difficult times. One of the greatest challenges Jack Ma faced wasn't external rejection, but internal doubt. Like many others, he struggled with moments of self-doubt, wondering if he was truly capable of achieving his ambitious goals. However, what separated him from many was his ability to push past those doubts and trust in his vision. He knew that overcoming internal challenges was just as important as facing external obstacles. Jack Ma often speaks about how the voices inside us can be the hardest to silence. Whether it's fear of failure or feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt can paralyze progress. Yet Jack Ma managed to quiet those doubts by focusing on his greater mission and the positive impact Alibaba could have. Overcoming those internal challenges allowed him to stay resilient, even when things looked bleak. For anyone on the path of self-improvement, overcoming self-doubt is a critical step. Whether you're working on personal development, self-discipline, or goal setting, those internal voices of doubt will always appear. Jack Ma's experience teaches us that while doubts may never fully disappear, learning to manage them can be the difference between giving up and achieving greatness. Jack Ma understood early on that feedback, especially tough feedback, was essential for growth. Many people shy away from criticism, but Jack Ma embraced it, knowing that it could provide him with the insight needed to improve. He was always open to hearing what others had to say, even when it was difficult, because he knew that those perspectives could highlight areas where he needed to grow both personally and professionally. Throughout his career, Jack Ma made it a point to surround himself with people who weren't afraid to give honest feedback. He saw every critique as an opportunity to adjust, refine, and improve his approach. This willingness to listen allowed him to steer Alibaba through some of its most challenging periods. For Jack Ma, success was not about being perfect, but about continuously evolving and improving. In personal growth and self-improvement, learning to accept and apply feedback is a crucial part of the journey. Whether in productivity, time management, or emotional intelligence, feedback can shine a light on blind spots and help you grow. Jack Ma's openness to feedback shows that even the toughest critiques can lead to the greatest advancements. One of Jack Ma's most powerful strategies was his ability to fail quickly and adjust rapidly. Rather than fearing failure, he embraced it, knowing that the faster he could identify what wasn't working, the quicker he could pivot and find success. This approach allowed Alibaba to innovate at a rapid pace, constantly adjusting its strategy to meet market demands. Jack Ma emphasized that failing quickly is not the same as giving up quickly. It's about recognizing when something isn't working and having the courage to change course. This approach helped him avoid getting stuck in strategies that weren't effective, allowing Alibaba to stay agile and responsive to new challenges. His willingness to make quick adjustments was a key factor in the company's ability to grow and succeed. This principle applies not only to business, but also to personal development. Whether it's in developing new habits or improving self-discipline, being willing to quickly recognize mistakes and make adjustments is crucial for long-term success. Jack Ma's approach to failure and rapid adjustment teaches us the importance of flexibility and adaptability in achieving our goals. Jack Ma's journey is a testament to how failure can ultimately lead to the creation of a lasting legacy. Each setback he faced on his path to success played a crucial role in shaping the leader he became and the company he built. Rather than allowing failures to define him, Jack Ma used each one as a stepping stone to something greater. Over time, these experiences contributed to the creation of Alibaba, a company that has revolutionized global commerce. What makes Jack Ma's story remarkable is not just his ability to overcome failure, but how he transformed those failures into lessons that shaped his vision for Alibaba. Every rejection and every mistake became part of a larger narrative that fueled the company's mission to empower small businesses worldwide. Today, Alibaba stands as a symbol of resilience, innovation, and the power of learning from failure. Jack Ma's legacy serves as a reminder that failure is not the end of the road, but part of the journey. In personal growth, the same principle applies. Each setback, each mistake, offers an opportunity to build something bigger and better. Jack Ma's ability to turn failure into a lasting legacy teaches us that the key to long-term success is not avoiding failure, but embracing it and using it to create something meaningful. Now that you've seen how Jack Ma turned every rejection and failure into stepping stones toward greatness, the question is, what will you do with the setbacks you face? Don't let fear of failure hold you back. Take those mistakes and use them to grow stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Jack Ma didn't just survive his failures, he thrived because of them. The real challenge is overcoming the internal doubts and continuing forward when success seems distant. Are you ready to embrace your own failures and turn them into your legacy? Revisit this video anytime you need a reminder that success doesn't come from perfection. It comes from perseverance. If you're committed to pushing past your obstacles, subscribe to this channel and activate the notifications to continue learning how to develop the mindset needed to achieve your dreams. And don't miss the next video. I've been rejected more than 30 times. Jack, May, Incredible Insights for Success, where we'll dive into even more actionable steps to help you stay on the path to success.